Keanu Reeves found a lost little girl alone at night. What he did next was unforgettable fictional inspirational story. Have you ever walked past someone without realizing that a single moment could change two lives forever? Most people believe heroes only exist in movies, but sometimes the greatest acts of kindness happen when no cameras are rolling. This is a fictional inspirational story imagining what might happen if Keanu Reeves crossed paths with a little girl who had lost everything except hope. The streets of Los Angeles were unusually quiet that night. A cold wind drifted through the empty sidewalks as the last few stores pulled down their shutters. Neon signs reflected off the wet pavement after an evening rain, making the city sparkle under the dim glow of streetlights. Most people were eager to get home, barely noticing the world around them. But on that particular night, one small figure sitting alone on a park bench would change everything. Keanu Reeves had just finished a late charity event across town. He could have gone straight home, but walking through the city had always helped him clear his mind. Wearing a simple black jacket, faded jeans, and an old baseball cap, he blended into the crowd like any ordinary person. Fame had never changed his love for quiet evenings or simple conversations with strangers. As he approached a small neighborhood park, something immediately caught his attention. Under a flickering street lamp sat a tiny girl, no older than 7 years old. She hugged a worn teddy bear tightly against her chest while her little feet dangled above the ground. Her pink hoodie was soaked from the earlier rain, and every few seconds she looked down the empty street as if she expected someone to appear. People walked past her without slowing down. Some glanced for only a second. Others never looked at all. But Keanu stopped. There was something about the sadness in her eyes that reminded him how invisible people can become in a busy city. He slowly walked closer, careful not to frighten her. "Hey there," he said softly. "Mind if I sit here?" The little girl looked up for only a moment before quietly nodding. Keanu sat on the opposite end of the bench, giving her enough space to feel safe. For nearly a minute, neither of them spoke. Sometimes silence says more than words. Finally, Keanu smiled gently. "My name is Keanu." The little girl looked at him again. "I'm Sophie." "That's a beautiful name." She hugged her teddy bear even tighter. "Are you waiting for someone?" Her tiny voice almost disappeared into the wind. "I was." Keanu's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "My mommy told me to stay here while she went to ask someone for help." "When was that?" Sophie looked toward the dark street again. "I don't know. It got dark. Then darker. And she still hasn't come back." Keanu checked his watch. It was almost midnight. No child should ever be sitting alone in a park at this hour. Trying not to alarm her, he gently asked a few more questions. She didn't know her address. She couldn't remember her mother's phone number. She only knew her mother's first name was Sarah. When Keanu asked if she was hungry, Sophie quietly nodded. "I didn't want to leave the bench. What if mommy came back and couldn't find me?" Those words hit Keanu harder than he expected. He stood up. "I'll be right back." Fear instantly filled Sophie's eyes. "Please don't leave too." Keanu immediately sat back down. "I promise I won't." Instead, he called a nearby cafe that was still open and asked if someone could bring food to the park. 15 minutes later, warm soup, sandwiches, and hot chocolate arrived. Sophie smiled as she wrapped her cold hands around the cup. It was the first smile Keanu had seen all night. While she slowly ate, he contacted the local police and explained the situation. Within minutes, officers arrived and began searching for reports of a missing child. But there were none. No calls. No reports. Nothing. It was as if Sophie had appeared out of nowhere. One officer gently asked if she remembered anything about where she lived. Sophie thought for several seconds before answering. "Our building has a blue bird painted on it." The officers exchanged confused looks. A blue bird mural wasn't much to go on in a city filled with thousands of buildings. Just as they prepared to take Sophie to a children's assistance center for the night, something unexpected happened. She reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I almost forgot. My mommy told me if I got scared, I should never lose this." Keanu carefully unfolded the paper. Inside was a child's drawing of a blue apartment building standing beside an old church with a tall clock tower. At the bottom, written in shaky handwriting, were 6 simple words. "Home is wherever love finds us." The officers didn't recognize the drawing. But Keanu noticed something everyone else missed. Earlier that week, while driving to the charity event, he had passed an old neighborhood with a church that had a massive clock tower. And across the street, he remembered seeing a building covered with an enormous mural of a blue bird. He immediately turned to the officers. "I think I know where this is." Without wasting another second, they drove toward the neighborhood, hoping they weren't already too late. When they arrived, the streets were almost empty. The blue mural was exactly where Keanu remembered it. Then, standing outside the apartment building, crying as she spoke with another police officer, was a young woman desperately clutching a soaked photograph. The moment Sophie stepped out of the police car, she screamed, "Mommy!" Sarah turned around. For a split second she couldn't believe her eyes. Then she ran. The two embraced so tightly that neither wanted to let go. Between tears, Sarah explained that she had collapsed while searching for help after her phone died. A passerby had called an ambulance because she had fainted from exhaustion and dehydration. When she woke up at the hospital hours later, she panicked, terrified that Sophie was still waiting where she'd left her. She had spent every second searching. And Sophie had done exactly what her mother had told her to do. She stayed put. Keanu quietly stepped back, allowing the family to have their moment. Sarah walked over, tears still streaming down her face. "I don't know how I'll ever thank you." Keanu smiled warmly. "You don't have to. Just promise me one thing. When life gets better, help someone else who feels alone." Sarah nodded without hesitation. "I promise." Several months later, Keanu received a small envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph of Sophie on her first day of school, smiling brighter than ever. On the back, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "You didn't just bring my daughter home. You gave both of us hope when we needed it most." Keanu folded the photograph and slipped it into his wallet. Not because anyone else would ever see it, but because it reminded him of something he had always believed. Sometimes the greatest role you'll ever play isn't on a movie screen. Sometimes it's simply stopping for one person when everyone else keeps walking. And on one quiet night, beneath a lonely street lamp, that simple choice changed 2 lives forever.